If you ever find yourself standing on the edge of the painted desert at sundown, you'll understand how it feels to be swallowed by colors that don't quite belong to this world. For Emily Bennett, the wild reds and purples of the Arizona sky that evening looked less like a masterpiece and more like a warning. She stood next to her stepmother's dusty blue SUV, clutching a cheap plastic bottle of water and a pack of stale crackers, wondering why her heart wouldn't stop pounding. "Stay right here, Emily," Janice Rowe said, trying to force a smile that never reached her eyes. Her makeup was perfect, her voice sugar-sweet, but there was something sharp underneath. "I just need to make a quick phone call." She clicked her heels across the gravel, phone pressed to her ear, her words lost in the dry wind. Emily glanced around, searching for comfort in the familiar, but all she found were the endless rolling dunes, their shadows twisting and stretching with the dying light. Even the air felt different here, dry, thin, and humming with a quiet threat. She thought of her father, his strong arms and deep laugh, the way he used to make her feel safe no matter how sick she got. But Dad was gone, taken by a heart attack that felt as sudden and violent as a summer thunderstorm, and Emily's world had never really stopped shaking since. After several minutes, Janice returned, her smile now completely gone. "You're old enough to wait alone, right?" Without waiting for an answer, she tossed Emily's backpack onto the sand. The bag felt heavier than usual. Emily later realized Janice had slipped in some of her old textbooks, maybe to keep up the charade of a picnic, maybe just to make her tired. "I'll be back soon," Janice said, avoiding Emily's gaze, and then she got in the car, turned the key, and drove away. The engine's growl faded into the desert, leaving only silence and the haunting call of a distant coyote. At first, Emily couldn't move. The sun was nearly gone, painting the desert with long, eerie shadows, and she felt small in a way she never had before. She thought about screaming for help, but the only answer was the wind, rattling dry grass and whispering secrets she couldn't understand. Minutes dragged by, then an hour. The heat that had baked the car all day now bled away, leaving her shivering. She sipped the water, rationing it the way her father had taught her, but it barely touched the sandpaper dryness in her throat. She tried to remember the path they'd taken, how many turns, how many miles from town, but everything blurred together. Emily's legs trembled as she stood, determined to find her way back. The desert stretched out, unforgiving, but she refused to cry. She picked a direction and started walking, clutching her father's faded bandana in one hand. With every step, her body reminded her of the rare illness she'd fought since birth, a hidden war her father always helped her win. But now she was alone, and every breath felt heavier. As dusk settled, the temperature plummeted. Emily's fever crept up, beads of sweat clinging to her forehead even as her teeth began to chatter. She stumbled over rocks and cactus spines, her vision swimming, her legs barely obeying her commands. At one point, she thought she saw the outline of a person standing on a distant hill, waving, "Dad!" But when she called out, the figure melted into shadow. A sudden gust knocked her off balance and she fell, scraping her hands and knees. Her backpack spilled open, books tumbling into the sand. She wanted to scream, to rage, but all that came out was a thin, desperate whimper. The sky above shimmered with stars, and for a moment, Emily wondered if she might be dreaming. The world felt far away. Finally, her strength gave out. She crawled under a twisted saguaro cactus, pressing her cheek against the cool earth, the bandana clutched tight in her hand. "Dad," she whispered, "please, Help me." Her eyes fluttered shut, darkness swirling at the edges of her mind. Somewhere, in the far-off distance, a Mustang's wild cry echoed. Blaze, her father's old friend, the jet-black stallion he'd once rescued from a barbed wire fence, stood restless in his corral, miles away. His ears flicked forward, nostrils flaring, as if he could sense the wrongness in the wind. Something was missing. Someone was calling out in a way only wild creatures can hear. That night, while Emily drifted in and out of fevered dreams beneath the open sky, Blaze broke free. He crashed through the brittle wooden fence, his powerful legs kicking up clouds of moonlit dust. Driven by instinct, memory, and the echo of his old master's voice, the Mustang galloped into the night, following a trail only he could sense. He crossed arroyos and scrambled up rocky ridges, his black coat shimmering with sweat and moonlight. As the desert night grew colder, Emily curled tighter beneath the cactus, her breaths coming slow and shallow. Coyotes gathered at the edge of the darkness, their eyes glinting, but they stayed away. Something bigger, wilder, and braver was coming. Somewhere in the distance, hooves thundered against stone, and a legend began to wake. The painted desert watched in silence as hope, fierce, wild, and unbroken, raced through the night, determined to find one lost, lonely child before dawn. As the first glimmer of dawn crept across the painted desert, a restless hush fell over the world. The land was cool, but a tension crackled in the air, like the whole desert was holding its breath. Emily Bennett lay curled beneath the cactus, shivering in her thin t-shirt, skin clammy with sweat despite the chill. She floated in and out of feverish dreams, her father's laughter, the thud of hoofbeats, the prick of the desert's thorns pressing into her arms. Her lips were cracked and dry. She whispered for help, for water, for anyone at all. But only the wind answered, rustling through the scrub like distant voices. Coyotes circled in the gray pre-dawn, their silhouettes shifting between rocks and brittle grass, hungry and watchful. Emily heard them yipping, felt the low rumble of their howls. She pulled her knees to her chest, clutching her father's bandana, desperate for something, anything that felt safe. That's when the sound came. A heavy, rhythmic pounding, too strong for any wild dog. Hoofbeats. At first, Emily thought she was still dreaming. Then she saw a shadow approach, black as midnight, moving with power and purpose. Blaze. He looked like a myth. Nostrils flared, mane tangled, muscles rippling with every stride. The stallion paused, head high, surveying the landscape with eyes sharp and wild. Blaze had always been more than just a horse. He was the last living gift from her father, the secret heartbeat of their little family. And now, somehow, against all odds, he had found her. Emily blinked up, dizzy with relief, her voice barely more than a croak. "Blaze." Blaze nickered softly, stepping close. He lowered his head, breathing warm air across her face, nudging her gently with his velvety nose. For a moment, Emily could have sworn she heard her father's voice, low and soothing. "Don't give up, kid. You're not alone." The big Mustang pressed his side against her, sharing his warmth, shielding her from the wind and the hungry eyes at the edge of the night. As the sun edged higher, Blaze used his body like a living blanket. He blocked the morning wind, curling protectively around Emily. Coyotes slunk away, their courage fading beneath Blaze's wild, unbroken stare. Every so often, Blaze would prod Emily with his nose, urging her to stay awake, to drink tiny sips of water when she could manage. He stomped and snorted at the circling scavengers, never letting them get too close. Emily's mind drifted in and out, sometimes lost in the burn of fever, sometimes soothed by the steady thump of Blaze's heartbeat. In one lucid moment, she realized how much she needed him, and how much he needed her. With every sunrise, hope and pain tangled together, stubborn as desert weeds. Hours passed. When the sun grew harsh, Blaze shifted to cast what little shade he could. The world felt smaller, hotter, more dangerous. Emily tried to sit up, but her limbs shook. She pressed her cheek against Blaze's neck, feeling his heartbeat like a promise. "Dad always said you were magic," she murmured, her voice hoarse. Don't let me disappear." Blaze seemed to understand. He tugged at her shirt with his teeth, gently urging her to move. Emily struggled to her feet, legs wobbling, her head spinning with heat and hunger. With effort, she hoisted herself onto Blaze's broad back, using his mane for balance. The world tilted, the desert shimmering with heat, but she clung on, feeling safer up high, above the sharp grass and scuttling insects. For the first time since her father's death, Emily felt something like courage flicker inside her. She looked to the horizon, saw endless red and gold, and remembered stories her father told. How wild horses could sense water even where there was none. How they could run for miles. How they never gave up. "Let's go, Blaze," she whispered. The Mustang's ears twitched. He took a slow, careful step, then another. He moved with patience, stopping often so Emily wouldn't slip or faint. She pressed her face into his mane, eyes squeezed shut, praying for shade, for water, for rescue. Time lost all meaning. The desert seemed endless. At one point, a rattlesnake slid across their path. Blaze stomped his hoof, sending it slithering away. Later, they paused at the shadow of a rock, Blaze nosing around for moisture. But the ground was bone dry. Emily dozed, slipping between waking and dreaming, sometimes convinced she saw her father standing by a fence, waving her on. When Emily started to fade, her grip slackening, her breath shallow, Blaze would pause, nudge her with his nose, and whinny, as if reminding her to hold on. Each sound snapped her back, just enough to keep fighting. As the sun slanted lower, a glint caught Blaze's eye, a flash of metal, half buried in a wash. He snorted, approaching with caution. There, hidden among thorn bushes and dust, was a battered green Jeep, the hood up, doors flung wide. A man lay slumped in the driver's seat, head lolling, face pale and drawn with exhaustion. Emily blinked, not sure if she was hallucinating. Blaze stepped closer, whinnying loud and sharp. The man jerked awake. He looked up, blinking through cracked glasses. "What the? A girl! On a horse!" Blaze nickered again, pawing at the ground. Emily tried to speak but could only croak. "Water. Please." The stranger, Dr. Thomas Walker, grabbed a dented canteen, stumbled over, and helped Emily down. He dribbled water onto her lips, his own hands shaking. "Easy now. Just a sip at a time." Blaze stood protectively between them, watching the desert, as if daring the world to try again. Emily opened her eyes, hope flickering. She wasn't alone anymore. The battered green Jeep's doors creaked in the wind as Emily tried to sit upright, legs curled beneath her on the torn seat. Her head spun, but the world finally seemed to slow down a little. No more endless desert, no more silent terror. She felt the cool rim of Dr. Walker's canteen pressed gently to her lips, the water both a relief and a shock to her parched throat. "Slowly," Dr. Walker said, his voice surprisingly soft for such a weathered man. He looked as battered as his Jeep, gray hair poking out from under a faded hat, skin sunburned and lined. hands trembling with both fatigue and nerves. But there was something kind in his eyes, a gentleness that reminded Emily of her father. Blaze stayed close, standing between Emily and the open desert like a sentry. He snorted occasionally, ears flicking at the distant sounds of coyotes or the rattle of insects, but his focus never left the small group. Emily reached out a shaky hand, resting it on Blaze's neck. The contact grounded her, and she could feel his steady strength seeping into her bones. Dr. Walker crouched beside her, eyes searching her face. "You're lucky he found you," he said, nodding to Blaze. "And luckier you held on until he brought you here." Emily looked at the man, noticing how thin and tired he looked. Are you sick?" she asked, her voice faint. "You don't look so good." He gave a weak chuckle, rubbing his chest. "You could say that. I have a rare autoimmune disease. Been managing it for years. Not always well." He paused, squinting at her with curiosity. "What about you? I can see you're not just tired from the heat." Emily nodded, feeling exposed. "It's called Evans syndrome. My immune system. It fights itself. Dad used to say my body's confused about who the real enemy is." She tried to laugh, but her voice cracked. "I'm supposed to take medicine. My stepmom, she..." Her words faded, replaced by a deep ache. Dr. Walker put a hand on her shoulder. "You're safe here. At least as safe as anyone gets in this desert." He looked toward the horizon, sighing. "I broke down 2 days ago. Radio's dead. Water's almost out. But we've got each other now. And Blaze, of course." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared struggle settling between them. Emily felt relief and fear twisted together. At least she wasn't alone anymore. But how would they get out of here? Blaze shifted, restless. Emily stroked his mane, whispering, "You saved me. You always save me." Dr. Walker handed her a battered pack. "I've got some medicine, a bit of food. We'll need to ration everything. If we're careful, we can last a little while." He rummaged in his kit and handed her 2 white pills. "Steroids for your immune system. You said Evans, right? I know the protocol. I have it too." Emily's eyes widened. "Really? I've never met anyone else." He nodded, a strange hope glimmering in his eyes. "Sometimes the universe sends the right people, even out here." Together, they set up a makeshift shelter using the Jeep's hood and a tarp. Blaze stood close, occasionally wandering off to graze on the tough desert grass, but always returning when Emily called. They gathered what little they could, half a pack of jerky, some stale crackers, and a tin of peaches, all split evenly. As night fell, Emily and Dr. Walker huddled under the tarp. The temperature dropped quickly, and the wind howled across the sand, rattling the metal of the Jeep. Emily pressed against Blaze's warm flank whenever she could, using him as both a pillow and a furnace. She could hear Dr. Walker's wheezing breaths, the pain he tried to hide with gentle words and dry jokes. They talked to keep the fear at bay. Dr. Walker told stories about his work as a scientist, researching rare diseases all over the world. He spoke of remote villages in South America, a hospital in Texas, and a daughter he'd lost touch with years ago. Emily, in turn, shared memories of her father, his laugh, the corny jokes, how he'd rescued Blaze when the horse was a wild, half-starved colt tangled in barbed wire. "I think Blaze remembers," Emily said quietly, gazing at the Mustang. "He always finds me. He always knows." Dr. Walker smiled, his eyes soft. "Animals are like that. They don't need words. They feel what matters." In the darkness, Emily's mind drifted. She thought of Janice, her stepmother, driving away without a backward glance. Was she scared, guilty, or just cruel? Emily's heart ached, but she reminded herself that right now, survival mattered more than answers. That night, as Blaze kept a silent watch over the camp, Emily dreamed of her father's hands, gentle and strong, guiding her through the shadows. In her dream, the stars seemed brighter than ever, a map across the sky, promising that hope could survive even here. When dawn broke, Dr. Walker was already up, fiddling with the Jeep's engine. Emily helped as much as her strength allowed, fetching water, sorting through the meager supplies, and cheering Blaze with gentle pats and soft words. She noticed how Dr. Walker moved slowly, every gesture careful, as if each movement might hurt. "We need to get out of here soon," he said, glancing at the sky. "Radio's dead, but if we can fix the alternator, maybe, just maybe, the engine will turn over." Emily nodded, determined. "We'll do it together." Her hands shook as she passed him tools, but the spark of hope grew a little brighter. In the days that followed, their odd trio became a team. Emily and Dr. Walker improvised solutions for every problem, siphoning water from the Jeep's radiator, using Blaze to scout for signs of life, and rationing every crumb of food. Blaze seemed to sense the urgency, never straying too far, always returning to nuzzle Emily and nudge Dr. Walker toward the next task. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long, Emily and Dr. Walker finally managed to rig the alternator with wire and an old belt. The engine coughed, sputtered, then died, but the sound was enough to fill them with a wild hope. That night, as they lay beneath a sky ablaze with stars, Emily felt something she hadn't known in a long time. She felt found. Not rescued, not saved, but connected. Through pain, fear, and the stubborn wildness of the painted desert, they'd become a fragile family. 3 survivors with nothing but courage and each other. The nights in the painted desert could trick you into thinking the world was gentle, the air crisp and clear, the stars burning close enough to reach. But every morning, the truth returned. Heat, thirst, and the endless shifting horizon. Emily woke beneath the tattered blue tarp, feeling every ache in her body as she turned to check on Dr. Walker. He was already awake, slouched against the side of the Jeep, fiddling with the broken radio in the thin, gray light. Blaze stood nearby, hooves planted in the cool sand, his breath misting gently in the early dawn. "Morning, Emily," Dr. Walker said, offering her a weak smile. "Didn't mean to wake you. Just hoping to catch a signal, that's all." She sat up, wrapping her arms around her knees, and watched as he turned the dial, static hissing in the air. The radio's battery was almost gone, and with every failed attempt, the hope of an easy rescue seemed to slip further away. "Anything?" she asked, her voice hopeful. "Nothing but ghosts," he replied, trying to laugh, but the sound came out thin and tired. He glanced at her and saw the worry in her eyes. "We'll figure something out, kid. Don't count us out yet." Emily nodded, wishing she could believe it as easily as he said it. She ran her fingers through Blaze's mane, drawing comfort from the Mustang's warmth and steady presence. It was easy to forget the world outside the desert, with its hospitals, classrooms, and the strange, painful quiet of her old house. Out here, every hour was a fight, every heartbeat, a small victory. They spent the day rationing what remained. A handful of jerky, a broken granola bar, a few sips of water from Dr. Walker's canteen. Emily felt the hunger burn in her belly, but she tried not to complain. Blaze foraged on prickly patches of grass, never straying far. His presence alone seemed to fill some invisible need, the sense that they weren't truly lost as long as he was with them. To fill the silence and keep their spirits up, Dr. Walker started telling stories. He spoke about the constellations overhead, about his time in Texas chasing wild storms and rare diseases, about how he once tried to build a radio from scrap wire and an old pie tin. Emily found herself laughing, sometimes so hard she forgot the ache in her chest or the taste of fear in her mouth. She shared stories, too, about her father's jokes, the time he'd pulled Blaze out of a flood-swollen arroyo, the way he'd insisted on teaching Emily to ride even when the doctors said she'd never be strong enough. Talking about him hurt, but it also kept him alive in her mind. As the afternoon faded into evening, they tried the radio one last time. The static was softer now, like a distant memory, and finally the battery gave a weak cough and died completely. "That's it then," Dr. Walker said quietly, setting it aside. "No one's coming for us, not unless we help them find us." Emily swallowed hard. "What do we do now?" He looked at her, weighing his words. "We wait for the night. We watch the stars. And in the morning, if we're strong enough, we try again." He looked to Blaze. "And maybe, just maybe, we trust this big guy to lead us." That night, Emily lay under the blanket of sky, her head on Blaze's flank, her thoughts drifting like clouds. She listened to Dr. Walker's breathing, the soft rumble of Blaze's chest, the far-off cry of a hawk. The desert was cold, but not as cold as loneliness. She traced the constellations with her finger, remembering her father's voice. "See that one, Emmy? That's Orion. He never gives up the hunt. He just keeps going." She wished she could find the same courage, the same hope in the shifting patterns above her. Sometime after midnight, Blaze snorted and nudged her awake. His ears were pricked forward, muscles tense. Emily sat up, her heart thudding, and peered into the darkness. For a moment she thought she saw lights, a flicker on a far ridge, gone almost as soon as it appeared. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Dr. Walker stirred, sitting up groggily. "See what?" Emily shook her head. "Maybe nothing. Maybe a campfire." He looked out over the desert, thoughtful. "We'll keep watch. It could be anything out here, but it's a sign. Maybe someone's close by. Or maybe the world just isn't done with us yet." The next morning, hope clung to Emily like dew. They packed what little they had, wrapped themselves in the tarp for warmth, and set out with Blaze leading the way. The big Mustang moved with purpose, ears flicking as he scanned the horizon for danger and possibility. Emily rode bareback, her legs aching but her grip firm. Dr. Walker leaned on a makeshift cane, keeping pace as best he could. The desert tested them. Long miles, no water, the threat of snakes and sunstroke always hovering, but they pressed on, telling stories, singing old songs, anything to keep the darkness at bay. Every so often, Blaze would pause, sniff the air, and then head off in a new direction, guided by instinct or some deeper wisdom Emily couldn't understand. They found shade beneath a lone juniper tree as the sun rose higher. Emily let herself rest, closing her eyes, trusting Blaze and Dr. Walker to keep watch. She dreamed of rivers and apple trees, of her father's arms lifting her into the saddle, of the laughter that once filled her house. When she woke, Dr. Walker was whispering quietly to Blaze, stroking the Mustang's nose with gentle hands. "He's something special," Dr. Walker said, noticing her. "Not just a horse, a guardian angel maybe. He's leading us somewhere. I can feel it." Emily nodded, feeling the same strange certainty. "We'll make it," she said softly. We have to. As evening fell, they found themselves on a rise overlooking a dry riverbed. In the fading light, Emily spotted something, an old fence barely visible against the sand, and a sign with half the letters missing. Dr. Walker grinned, weary but triumphant. Civilization, kid, or what's left of it. Emily laughed, feeling tears sting her eyes. For the first time since the nightmare began, she let herself believe they would survive this, and whatever waited on the other side, they would face it together. Under the wide Arizona sky, hope found new roots, and even the painted desert seemed a little less lonely. Dawn arrived in the painted desert with the false promise of relief. The sky glowed with bruised lavender and pink, but the air had already begun to shimmer with heat. Emily woke to a gnawing hunger and a burning thirst. Her tongue felt thick, her lips split and stinging. She glanced at Dr. Walker and saw the pain etched even deeper into his face. His hands trembled as he reached for the battered canteen, only to find it nearly empty. "Only a swallow left," he said quietly, his voice scratchy and weak. "You should take it, Emily." She shook her head, determination flashing in her tired eyes. "We split it," she replied, her voice barely more than a whisper. "That's the rule." Dr. Walker managed a crooked smile and handed her the canteen. Emily poured a drop onto her palm and offered it to Blaze first. The stallion licked her hand, then nudged her gently, as if urging her to take care of herself too. Emily drank, savoring the tiny life-giving sip, then passed the canteen back to Dr. Walker, who did the same. After splitting the last of their jerky and crackers, the three survivors gathered what little they had and prepared to move. The promise of civilization, an old fence, a half-buried sign, had filled Emily with hope the night before. Now the reality of survival pressed in hard and sharp. Every step counted, every minute precious. The sun rose quickly, merciless and white-hot. Blaze led the way, nose to the ground, seeking any trace of moisture or shelter. Emily walked beside him, supporting Dr. Walker when his strength gave out. The older man's breath rasped in his chest, each step a battle. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and more than once he staggered, his weight nearly pulling Emily to the ground. "We'll make it, Dr. Walker," she said, her tone as firm as she could manage, even as her own legs threatened to buckle. "Blaze knows where we're going." Dr. Walker grunted. "That horse is half wizard, I swear." Emily tried to smile, but fear gnawed at her heart. The desert seemed endless, the heat rising in shimmering waves off the sand. Around noon, a sandstorm began to brew on the horizon, a wall of wind and grit racing toward them, blotting out the sun. Emily felt a rush of panic, her father's voice echoing in her mind. "Find shelter. Don't fight the wind. Cover your face." "Storm!" she called, grabbing Dr. Walker's arm and pointing to a cluster of rocks a few hundred yards away. "We have to move. Now!" Blaze whinnied, circling them protectively as the sky darkened. Emily helped Dr. Walker stumble toward the rocks, every step a fight against the sand, tearing at their skin. They collapsed behind the largest boulder, pulling the tarp over their heads as the wind screamed around them. Emily pressed her face into Blaze's warm side, heart pounding, minutes stretched into an hour. Sand stung her eyes and coated her throat. She clung to the Mustang, feeling his steady heartbeat, while Dr. Walker coughed and gasped beside her. She whispered to Blaze, telling him stories about her father, about the day they first found him in the wild, wounded and terrified. The words calmed her, steadied her hands. Finally, the wind died down, leaving silence and choking dust. Emily crawled out, coughing, eyes streaming. The desert had changed. New drifts of sand, strange patterns etched by the storm. The sun was dipping low, casting long, eerie shadows across the land. Dr. Walker struggled to his feet, swaying. Emily tried to help, but she could feel the fever creeping back into her own body, her skin burning, chills racking her frame. "We can't stop now," Dr. Walker muttered, determination burning in his faded eyes. "If we rest, we might never get up again." Emily nodded, teeth chattering. Blaze lowered his head, nudging her forward. She clung to his mane, letting him guide her through the maze of rocks and scrub. They moved slowly, exhaustion pressing down with every step. A sudden rattle sent Emily's heart into her throat. She froze. Just ahead, a coiled rattlesnake blocked their path, its tongue flicking in and out, body tense and ready to strike. Blaze reared, snorting, and stomped the ground, warning the snake away. Emily grabbed Dr. Walker, pulling him back, and together they circled wide, their hearts pounding. The desert felt more alive and more dangerous than ever. As the sun began to set, the last of their water was gone. Emily's fever rose, her thoughts slipping in and out of clarity. Dr. Walker collapsed once, twice, then fell and did not get up. Emily dropped to her knees beside him, tears mixing with sweat and dust. She shook him, calling his name. He stirred faintly, whispering, "Go on, Emmy. Don't let it end here." Blaze knelt beside them, nuzzling Dr. Walker's hand, then Emily's cheek. The Mustang's eyes were wild and bright, as if he could see something they couldn't. A path through the darkness. A reason to keep moving. Emily felt a surge of determination. "No," she said, forcing herself to stand. "We stick together. Blaze, help me, please." With the last of her strength, she draped Dr. Walker's arm over Blaze's strong neck. The horse braced himself, standing steady as Emily and Dr. Walker leaned on him for support. Step by step, they pressed on, heading for a distant ridge that shimmered with the promise of water, of rescue, of anything but more sand. The journey became a blur of footsteps, gasps, and the relentless drumbeat of Blaze's hooves. Emily began to talk, sometimes to Blaze, sometimes to Dr. Walker, sometimes just to the silent desert. She recited old poems, sang bits of songs her father loved, told stories about stars and rivers and a world beyond the desert. Night finally fell. They reached the crest of the ridge just as the sky exploded with stars. In the hollow below, Emily thought she saw a shimmer, a patch of ground darker and richer than the rest. "Water," she whispered, almost afraid to believe. Blaze whinnied and started down the slope, carrying them toward hope as the desert night closed in, cool and full of unseen promise. Emily clung to Blaze, to Dr. Walker, to the memory of her father and the hope that somewhere, someone was searching for them too. The painted desert, once a prison, had become their battleground. Now, on the edge of exhaustion, it offered a glimmer of salvation. The race wasn't over, not yet. Night in the desert was a living thing, cold and quick to remind anyone stranded beneath its vast sky how small and fragile they truly were. Emily pressed her cheek to Blaze's warm neck, letting his steady breath and the rise and fall of his chest soothe her panic. Every muscle in her body ached, fever twisting through her veins. She was dimly aware of Dr. Walker shivering beside her, propped against a rock, face shadowed and slack. But when she looked up, Emily saw something she hadn't dared hope for. Down in the hollow below their ridge, a narrow line of moonlight caught on a sliver of green, a patch of cattails waving gently in the breeze, a dark streak snaking through the sand. Water. The word was a prayer on her lips. With Blaze leading the way, they stumbled and slid down the ridge. Emily's vision blurred with exhaustion, but she held tight to the stallion's mane and whispered encouragement. At the edge of the spring, Blaze snorted, pawing at the muddy bank, and drank deep, long gulps. Emily fell to her knees, scooping handfuls of water into her mouth, savoring every drop. Dr. Walker collapsed beside her, drinking, coughing, then drinking again. When they'd finally slaked their thirst, Emily filled the battered canteen and splashed water over her face. Hope pulsed in her chest, a fragile, fluttering thing. "We found it," she breathed. "Dad, we found it." Blaze grazed nearby, flicking his ears, his coat shining in the moonlight. He seemed stronger now, almost defiant, his wild spirit undiminished by hardship. With water in their bellies and a thin layer of damp earth beneath them, Emily and Dr. Walker rested for a few precious hours. Emily slept fitfully, fever still biting at her thoughts, but every time she stirred, she felt Blaze's warm breath or the gentle pressure of his nose. The sun was just cresting the horizon when Dr. Walker shook her gently awake. "Emily, we have to move. If we're going to get out, today's the day." His voice was steadier now, still rough, but stronger. Emily struggled to her feet, her body protesting every movement. She noticed how Dr. Walker massaged his legs, flexing aching joints, and how his hands trembled slightly less. The water had done its magic, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Emily looked at the battered Jeep, stranded 100 yards away. Its frame was half buried in sand, but the repairs they'd made days ago flashed in her mind. The twisted wires, the patched belts, the hope that had kept them tinkering even as supplies ran out. "I have an idea," she said quietly, wiping grit from her eyes. "Blaze can pull the Jeep. If we lash a rope to the bumper and you steer, maybe we can make it across the flat." Dr. Walker stared, then gave a weak laugh. "Kid, you're a genius, a stubborn, hopeful genius." He coughed, then squeezed her hand. "Let's give it a try." They spent the next hour gathering rope from the supply kit, improvising a harness with strips torn from the tarp and Emily's backpack straps. Blaze stood patiently, sniffing their hands, as they looped the rope around his broad chest and attached the other end to the Jeep's bumper. Emily climbed onto Blaze's back, whispering into his ear, "Easy, boy. Just a little further. You saved me. Now help save us all." Dr. Walker wedged himself behind the wheel, wincing as he turned the key. The engine wheezed, coughed, and fell silent. He tried again, and the battered Jeep sputtered to life, just barely. "Ready when you are?" Emily clicked her tongue, guiding Blaze forward. The rope pulled taut, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a grunt and a determined toss of his head, Blaze leaned into the harness and began to pull. The wheels groaned, sinking into the sand, but the Jeep inched forward, one stubborn foot at a time. For a mile they made slow progress. Blaze's muscles straining, Emily urging him on, Dr. Walker fighting the wheel and coaxing the tired engine. Twice they had to stop and dig out the wheels. Once Blaze stumbled, and Emily slid to the ground, nearly collapsing beside him. She pressed her forehead to his, drawing strength from the warmth and fire in his eyes. "Just a little more, Blaze. Just a little more." The desert stretched on, the sun rising higher, heat pressing down like a heavy hand. Emily's fever came and went in waves. Dr. Walker's cough grew harsher, but hope shimmered just out of reach. a promise on the horizon. Suddenly, in the distance, a flash of movement caught Emily's eye. She shaded her face and squinted. Was that headlights? A search party? Or just a mirage? "Dr. Walker, I see something. Lights!" He slammed on the horn, but the Jeep only wheezed. Emily fumbled through her bag, heart pounding, and found her father's faded bandana. Her hands shook as she wrapped it around a stick, doused it with the last of their precious water, and dug out a box of old matches from the supply kit. With trembling fingers, she struck a match, lit the bandana, and waved it high. The fabric flared, flames licking skyward, orange against the pale blue of day. Blaze, sensing the urgency, let out a wild, ringing neigh that echoed through the valley. On the far ridge, the headlights jerked, paused, then veered in their direction. "It worked!" Emily shouted, tears streaming down her face. "They see us! Blaze! They see us!" Within minutes, the sound of engines and shouting voices filled the air. Rescuers poured from 2 trucks. Ranchers, a sheriff, a medic. Emily slumped to the ground, relief flooding through her. Dr. Walker sagged behind the wheel, eyes shining. "Hang on, kid," he said, voice breaking. "Looks like our luck just turned." Emily hugged Blaze's neck, burying her face in his tangled mane. The Mustang stood tall, ears pricked, eyes bright. Against every odd, they had survived, together. As the rescuers gathered around, Emily looked up at the vast, empty sky and whispered, "Thank you, Dad. We made it." In that moment, the Painted Desert wasn't a place of loss, but a place of miracles, where hope, wild and unbroken, had found its way home. The ambulance's wailing siren faded into the distance as Emily blinked up at the white hospital ceiling, feeling the sharp tang of antiseptic in the air and the steady beeping of machines somewhere behind her. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, almost too bright after so many days under the wild, open sky. It felt unreal, like waking from a fever dream she couldn't quite remember, only to realize she was finally, truly safe. Nurses hurried in and out, checking monitors, hanging IV bags, and whispering about the miracle Mustang who had saved a child's life out in the Painted Desert. Emily drifted in and out of sleep, the faces above her blurring together. Her rescuers, a kind doctor with a southern accent, Dr. Walker, who lay in a bed beside her, pale but smiling. Blaze, of course, couldn't be inside. He was outside the hospital in a makeshift corral, drawing a crowd of reporters, children, and local ranchers. Even through the thick glass window, Emily could see people snapping photos, hanging banners, and trying to get close to the famous black Mustang. A news van idled in the parking lot, the anchor rehearsing lines about courage, survival, and the legendary Blaze. Every so often, she would spot the Mustang's familiar silhouette against the sunset, mane blowing in the wind, ears flicking at the sound of her voice through the glass. In those first hours, as Emily faded in and out of consciousness, she dreamed of her father. Sometimes he was laughing, sometimes just walking beside her on a dusty path, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. She told him everything in her dreams, about Janice, about the fear and hope, about the way Blaze had never let her give up. When she finally woke for good, Dr. Walker was awake as well, his face drawn but alert. "Morning, partner," he said, giving her a lopsided grin. "Looks like we made it." Emily smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Thanks to Blaze? And you?" A nurse bustled in, carrying a tray. "Doctor says you're both on the mend. You're lucky, dehydration, infection, fever. But you're fighters." She paused, studying Emily's face. "There are some people who want to speak with you. The police." and someone from social services. Emily's heart skipped. She remembered Janice, the cold look on her face, the car pulling away, the way Emily's own cries had vanished into the desert air. Shame and anger twisted together inside her, but she nodded, determined not to flinch. Later that afternoon, a detective with a kind voice and tired eyes sat at Emily's bedside. "Emily, can you tell me what happened out there? Anything you remember will help us make sure you're safe." Emily took a shaky breath and told him everything. Her illness, her father's death, Janice's growing coldness, and the way the picnic had turned into a nightmare. The detective listened quietly, taking notes. When Emily was finished, he squeezed her hand gently. "You're very brave, and I promise you, Janice won't hurt you or anyone else again." A week later, Janice Rowe was arrested for child endangerment, abandonment, and neglect. The town buzzed with the news. Everyone seemed to have an opinion, and everyone wanted to help. The sheriff's wife dropped off fresh flowers and warm cookies every day. Neighbors from all over brought stuffed animals, cards, and even painted signs that read, "Emily and Blaze, our heroes." Blaze became a local legend overnight. The hospital staff took turns feeding him carrots and apples, and even the grumpiest security guard couldn't keep kids from sneaking out to see him. When the media found out about his story, it spread like wildfire. National news anchors showed footage of Blaze galloping through the painted desert, interviews with ranchers who called him the bravest horse in Arizona, and photos of Emily hugging his thick black neck. Reporters crowded Emily's hospital room, snapping photos and asking questions she barely understood. "How did Blaze know where to find you? What was it like riding a wild Mustang? What would you say to other kids who feel alone?" Emily answered as best she could, always returning to the same truth. "I never gave up, and Blaze never left me. Even when I thought I couldn't go on, he was there." One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the hospital room glowed gold, a nurse hurried in, breathless. "Emily, you have a visitor. Someone who says she's your mother." The world seemed to stop. Emily's heart hammered, 1,000 questions swirling in her head. She'd never known her mother, just faint stories, a photograph tucked into her father's wallet, a sense of loss she could never name. She pushed herself upright, trembling. The door opened. A woman stood there, older than Emily imagined, her face tired but beautiful, eyes shining with tears. She carried the same sadness Emily saw in her own reflection, but also hope, a hope that felt as wild and unexpected as Blaze himself. "Emily," the woman's voice broke. "I've been searching for you for so long." Emily's throat tightened. For a moment she didn't move, afraid this might be another dream. Then, slowly, she reached out, and her mother crossed the room in 2 strides, gathering her into a hug that felt like home. They cried together, quiet, aching tears, while outside, Blaze tossed his head and neighed, as if celebrating his own kind of reunion. That night, Emily lay in bed, her mother's arms around her, Dr. Walker snoring softly nearby, and Blaze resting peacefully beneath the stars. The loneliness that had once filled her heart had been replaced by something else, something brave and whole. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more news, more change. But for the first time, Emily believed she could face anything. After all, she had survived the desert, found her family, and brought a miracle Mustang home. Spring arrived in Arizona with a softness that seemed impossible after the desert's brutal trials. Wildflowers painted the ground in splashes of yellow and purple, and the air buzzed with the promise of second chances. For Emily, everything felt new. The taste of freedom, the warmth of a family gathered not by blood, but by love and fate, and the powerful bond with a black Mustang whose courage had changed her life forever. It started with a single idea. Emily, her mother Claire, Dr. Walker, and Blaze sat together on the porch of a rundown ranch on the edge of town, watching the sun sink behind the painted cliffs. Claire wrapped an arm around Emily's shoulders, her hand gentle and steady. Dr. Walker nursed a mug of tea, his eyes sparkling with a hint of the old mischief. "We could do some good here," Emily said one evening, voice quiet but determined. "There are kids like me, kids who feel sick or different or alone. What if this place could help them the way Blaze helped me?" Her mother squeezed her hand. "I love that. We can build something beautiful together." Dr. Walker grinned, looking at Blaze, who stood in the corral, mane rippling in the evening breeze. "Therapy animals are real magic, kid. This horse, he's more than a legend. He's living hope." Within a month, the little ranch was transformed. Volunteers arrived, nurses from the hospital, neighbors who'd heard Emily's story, teachers, and even a few ranchers who remembered Blaze running wild. Fences were mended, stables were cleaned, and a faded sign at the gate was repainted. Hope Springs Ranch. The news covered the transformation, calling it a miracle born in the desert. Blaze became the heart of the ranch, his calm presence a magnet for every scared, uncertain child who arrived. Emily watched as Blaze approached a boy in a wheelchair, lowering his great head until the boy could stroke his nose. She saw a shy girl with bandaged arms light up as Blaze nudged her gently, then walk a little taller after their first ride together. But Blaze wasn't alone. The ranch took in other horses, old, injured, unwanted. Under Blaze's quiet leadership, the herd became a team. Some days, you could see Emily, her mother, and Dr. Walker leading children through the fields, telling stories about courage and second chances. There were hard days, too. Emily's illness hadn't disappeared, and Dr. Walker's health waxed and waned. But a miracle happened in the least expected way. During one of Dr. Walker's hospital stays, Emily's mother offered to donate blood for a routine test. The results surprised everyone. Emily's rare antibodies, passed on through her blood, seemed to help Dr. Walker's immune system stabilize, easing his symptoms and giving him strength he hadn't felt in years. Word spread quickly. Doctors, scientists, and reporters visited Hope Springs, eager to learn about the Blaze antibody. Emily and Dr. Walker underwent tests and interviews, sometimes overwhelmed by the attention, but always remembering why they'd started: to help others find the courage to hope. The ranch flourished. Emily's mother handled the paperwork and fundraising, while Dr. Walker managed the therapy programs, using his scientific expertise to train staff and volunteers. Emily, though still fighting her own battles, became the heart of it all. Her laughter echoing across the paddocks, her gentle words guiding new arrivals through their fears. Every afternoon, after the last child left, Emily would sit with Blaze beneath the cottonwoods, the air sweet with hay and wildflowers. She'd tell him about the day, the successes and the struggles, and Blaze would listen, calm and attentive, his eyes wise and old as the hills. Sometimes Emily thought about her father. She could almost hear his voice on the wind, see his proud smile as he watched her ride Blaze across the open fields. He'd always said she was strong, stronger than she'd ever know. Now, with Blaze and her new family by her side, Emily believed it too. The town embraced Hope Springs Ranch, turning it into a place of pilgrimage for families in need. Local businesses donated supplies, and the mayor declared an official Blaze Day, celebrating the Mustang's heroism and the hope he'd sparked in their small community. Children came from across the state, some walking, some wheeled in by parents, all looking for a place where they could be seen, understood, and healed. One chilly morning, as fog rolled in from the desert, Emily watched a little boy with a feeding tube reach out for Blaze. The Mustang nickered softly, stepping close, and the boy's face lit up in wonder. Emily knelt beside him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. Blaze was lost once, too, she said gently. But he found his way home. You will, too. The boy looked up at her, eyes shining with hope. Do you promise? Emily smiled, feeling the weight of everything she'd survived, and nodded. I promise. That night, as stars filled the sky, Emily sat on the porch with her mother and Dr. Walker. The ranch glowed with lantern light, the soft sounds of horses and children drifting on the breeze. Claire hugged Emily close, tears shining in her eyes. You changed the world, sweetheart. You and Blaze. Emily looked at the horizon, heart full. No, Mom, we all did. In the gentle hush of Hope Springs Ranch, past and future finally felt at peace. A place of pain had become a haven of healing, a new beginning for everyone willing to believe in the impossible. By the time summer faded into a gentle autumn, Hope Springs Ranch had become more than a refuge. It was a movement. Families arrived from towns across Arizona and beyond, each carrying burdens of illness, loneliness, or fear. But within days, the ranch's dusty trails, laughter-filled stables, and wild, sweet scent of hay became the soil where hope took root. Emily had found her voice. In the beginning, she was shy, unsure if anyone wanted to hear her story. But as the children and families gathered each week for the ranch's campfire nights, she stepped up, Blaze at her side, and spoke from her heart. She told the story of the painted desert. She described the way the sun burned and the night froze, how loneliness and fear threatened to swallow her whole, and how a single wild Mustang, her father's old friend, had never stopped searching for her. Emily spoke about survival, but also about surrender. The moment she learned that asking for help wasn't weakness, but the first step to finding strength. Blaze didn't save me because I was strong, she said one evening, her voice soft but clear over the crackle of the fire. He saved me because he saw me, because he cared, even when I couldn't care for myself. The children listened, wide-eyed, some clinging to their parents, others to the soft manes of the horses standing quietly behind them. Many of them knew pain and uncertainty far too well. For some, it was physical, a limp, a scar, a face marked by illness. For others, it was hidden inside. Dr. Walker, now much improved thanks to Emily's rare antibody, joined her for these talks. He would tell stories about the Blaze antibody, the tiny miraculous gift that now offered new treatment options for people with autoimmune conditions around the country. His research, published in a leading medical journal, credited Emily and Blaze as the true heroes, and soon, scientists traveled to Hope Springs to learn from their story. We used to think hope was a medicine you swallowed, Dr. Walker joked to a crowd of students from the local high school. But turns out, it's a wild Mustang and a little girl with more grit than most grown men. The ranch soon became a model for similar centers across the country. People wrote letters, called in donations, and some even packed up their lives to start healing ranches in other states. Blaze's legend grew, inspiring children who felt different or left behind. Emily often received drawings and letters from kids she'd never met. One little girl in Wisconsin drew a picture of herself riding a horse with a black mane, captioned, "Someday, I'll be brave like Emily and Blaze." Despite the growing fame, life on the ranch remained honest and simple. Emily still woke up early, her body sometimes aching, her lungs stubborn, but each morning she was greeted by Blaze's gentle nicker. Together, they would check on the other horses, most of them rescues like Blaze, and welcome new arrivals with soft words and calm touches. On weekends, Emily's mother would drive her to the children's hospital in town. There, Emily told her story in classrooms and at patients' bedsides, her words gentle and real. She spoke of not just surviving, but thriving, even in a body that didn't always cooperate. "You don't have to be perfect to matter," Emily would say, her eyes bright. "And you don't have to go through it alone." Some of the hospital staff were skeptical at first. What could a teenager and a horse teach that medicine could not? But over time, they watched children's faces light up as Emily and Blaze rolled up in the old ranch truck, watched withdrawn kids stand a little taller, laugh a little louder, and believe, if only for a moment, that they too could be strong. Dr. Walker continued his research, but he never forgot his promise to Emily. To put people, not just patients, first. The Blaze Protocol, a blend of new treatments, community support, and animal therapy, began to spread. Across the country, hospitals and schools adopted the ranch's principles, creating spaces where hope was as important as medicine. For Emily, the best moments weren't in the newspapers or on TV, but in the quiet spaces between. In the hush before dawn, she would ride Blaze out into the pasture, letting him gallop full speed beneath the endless sky. She felt every heartbeat, every breath, alive, wild, and unbroken. Sometimes she'd see a new child arrive at the ranch, eyes wide with fear or pain. Emily would kneel beside them, share her bandana, and listen, truly listen, to their stories. Blaze would step close, offering his nose for a gentle pat, and Emily would say, "You belong here just like us." Word spread from child to child, parent to parent, doctor to doctor. Hope was real, and it lived at the edge of the painted desert. It looked like a girl and her Mustang, and it sounded like laughter where once there had only been tears. The ranch's first anniversary was celebrated with music, banners, and, of course, a parade led by Blaze himself. As Emily waved to the crowd, she saw kids from the hospital, old friends and neighbors who had once doubted if she would even survive. Now they cheered, holding signs that read, "Thank you, Blaze," and "Emily's hope heals." That night, after the celebration, Emily sat with her mother and Dr. Walker beneath the stars. Blaze stood watch beside them, his muzzle gray around the edges, but his eyes bright as ever. "You know," Emily whispered, "I used to think the desert was just empty and cruel, but now I see it's a place where hope grows, even when everything else says it shouldn't." Dr. Walker nodded, his voice soft. "That's the lesson, kid. When you feel lost, when you feel alone, sometimes all it takes is a wild heart to lead you home." And under that vast Arizona sky, with Blaze at her side and her family around her, Emily knew those lessons would never fade. The painted desert would always be part of her, but so would hope. Years slipped by in a gentle, sunlit blur at Hope Springs Ranch. The seasons changed, but the heart of the place beat as strong as ever. Thundering hooves, children's laughter, and the quiet moments of courage that made legends. Emily Bennett grew tall and steady, her hair long and sun-bleached, her body strong from years of riding and the soft battles she fought every day. Though she would always live with her illness, it no longer defined her. She had learned, sometimes the hard way, that life was bigger than any diagnosis. Blaze, the Mustang who had once been a wild shadow on the horizon, was now gray around his muzzle, his coat flecked with white. But age had only deepened his spirit. He led the herd at Hope Springs, his presence calm and proud, guiding nervous new rescues and letting tiny hands tug gently at his mane. People came from all over the country just to meet him. The kids called him Miracle Mustang, and even the toughest ranchers treated him like royalty. On quiet mornings, Emily liked to sit beside him in the pasture, the warm silence between them deeper than words. Emily's family had changed, too. Her mother, Claire, had found healing in the work they did together. Her laughter returning, her grief softened by new joy. Dr. Walker, now a fixture at the ranch, continued his research, traveling to conferences and bringing home fresh ideas, but always returning in time for Blaze's evening carrot and the family's dinner on the porch. Over the years, more people joined their circle. Volunteers, young doctors, kids who came for healing and stayed to help. Hope Springs became not just a refuge, but a home for anyone with a wild or wounded heart. Emily never forgot what the Painted Desert had taught her. Each year, she traveled to schools, hospitals, and conferences, sharing her story. She never made herself the hero. She spoke of mistakes, fears, and the times she wanted to give up. She talked about her father, about Janice, and about the night she nearly vanished beneath the stars. But most of all, she spoke about Blaze. Sometimes, Emily would say, standing at a podium or kneeling beside a hospital bed, what saves us isn't something inside ourselves, but the love we're given, the friends who refuse to let us disappear. Blaze didn't care that I was sick or scared or different. He just showed up every single time. And because he did, I learned to show up for others too. Her story became a spark. Children wrote to her from across the world. Kids fighting cancer, kids grieving, kids who'd lost a parent or felt invisible. They sent drawings of horses and wild deserts, letters that began, "Dear Emily" and "Blaze," and sometimes confessions of fear or hope. Emily answered every letter, often with a photo of Blaze and a promise. You are never truly alone. Blaze's legend inspired new healing ranches in distant states. The Blaze Protocol, a blend of medical treatment, animal therapy, and community, spread thanks in part to Dr. Walker's relentless advocacy. Hospitals and nonprofits invited Emily to speak, and Blaze even became the mascot for a children's health campaign, his image painted on murals and billboards from Texas to Oregon. There was even a children's book, Blaze's Promise, that told their story in bright, wild pictures. But for Emily, the legacy wasn't just about headlines or hospital tours. It was the quiet, daily work of hope. She mentored new volunteers, some still fragile, unsure if they belonged, guiding them as gently as Blaze had once guided her. She led support groups for kids with chronic illness and for families who had lost hope. She rode out into the desert with children who needed space to breathe, teaching them to listen to the wind, the horses, and their own hearts. One autumn evening, the ranch held its annual Blaze Day festival. The fields overflowed with families, old friends and new ones, some who had traveled hundreds of miles just to be there. Food trucks lined the fence, and the air was filled with music and the sounds of happy chaos. Blaze, now slower but still dignified, led the opening parade, Emily walking proudly at his side, a bandana tied around her neck. Kids ran beside them, waving flags and laughter spilling over the fields. Later, as the sun set and the sky blazed gold and purple, Emily stood atop a small hill, looking out at everything they had built. She saw Blaze grazing near a group of kids, Dr. Walker sharing a quiet story with a family, her mother holding hands with a new volunteer. For a moment, Emily's heart ached with gratitude, so full she thought she might burst. She thought of the girl she had once been, alone and frightened in the painted desert, abandoned by someone who was supposed to love her. She thought of the wild horse who refused to leave her behind. Everything had changed. And yet, the most important things, the courage to keep going, the kindness of strangers, the wild hope that carried them all, remained. When the stars came out, Emily gathered everyone around the campfire. She told the old story again, how she and Blaze had survived the impossible, and how hope, once found, was meant to be shared. Her voice trembled a little, but she looked at all the faces shining in the firelight and knew her words mattered. "Miracles don't always come the way we expect," she said softly. "Sometimes they look like a wild horse. Sometimes they look like a stranger who becomes family. And sometimes the greatest miracle is discovering that even in the harshest desert, hope and kindness can bloom." As the fire crackled and the desert wind whispered across the fields, Emily smiled at Blaze, who stood watching her, proud and strong, his eyes reflecting the flames and stars. Their story, now a beloved local legend, would be told and retold for years, reminding everyone that miracles are born from compassion, courage, and the unbreakable bonds between the lost, the lonely, and the wild-hearted. And somewhere out in the painted desert, under that endless Arizona sky, hope galloped on, untamed and forever.